You slept with my son? The man upstairs asked. And you wear those slippers? I froze. One foot still inside the apartment, the other awkwardly planted on the hallway floor, clutching a half-filled trash bag and wearing the aforementioned slippers, fuzzy, bright orange, and very much a cry for help. You must be Varin, I said, forcing a smile. Nice to meet you. Love what you've done with the passive-aggressive tone. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, and so still he looked sculpted from stone, tilted his head, as if studying a particularly disappointing painting. You smell like coffee, he said slowly. And regret. That tracks, I muttered. It was day 3 in apartment 4B, which smelled like fresh paint and instant noodles. Most of my things were still in boxes. My cat Rosa had claimed the space beneath the couch as her fortress, only emerging to hiss at the ceiling every time a noise came from above. And there were a lot of noises from above. I was trying not to be a paranoid post-breakup cliché, but when your upstairs neighbor sounded like they were dragging talons across the floor at 3 a.m., and occasionally muttered in a language that vibrated the pipes, you asked questions. Or, in my case, you avoided confrontation and took out the trash instead. Which is how I met him. He was standing just outside the stairwell door, completely motionless, hands in the pockets of a long black coat despite the heat, eyes like cut obsidian. Close up I noticed the strange ageless quality about him. His skin was deep-toned, flawless, but there were lines near his eyes that looked earned. Old, but not in a human way. He was calm. Too calm. I, on the other hand, looked like I'd lost a fight with a cardboard box and a microwave dinner. You slept with my son, he said again. Quieter now, but not gentler. It wasn't a question. Technically he slept with me, I said, raising an eyebrow. But you probably didn't want that visual. His jaw tightened. He cried for 3 days after you left. Pretty sure that was because I took the espresso machine. Silence, stretched like taffy. Then he added, You should move out. I blinked. Wow. You skipped the small talk and went straight for the eviction arc. Bold. I'm not your neighbor, he said. I'm just nearby. Temporarily. Right. I nodded slowly. And I'm just emotionally stable. Temporarily. He didn't smile. Of course he didn't. He just looked at me with that unblinking predator focus, like he was waiting for me to either cry or combust. I did neither, thank you very much. I took a moment to really look at him. He did resemble Caleb, my ex. Same sharp jawline, same intense eyebrows. But where Caleb had always been restless, hot-tempered, this man was made of cold control. A statue with a grudge. You're really his dad? I asked finally. No offense, but I thought Caleb was grown in a vat of gym memberships and daddy issues. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those eyes. Amusement? Annoyance? Hunger? All three? I was absent, he said. No kidding. Another pause. You're weak, he added. Too emotional. You cry at sunsets. That happened once, and it was a very moving sunset, I snapped. And you? What, stalk your son's exes to critique their footwear? His eyes dropped briefly to my slippers. A long, disappointed look. It was laundry day, I defended. Sure, he said. But was it Judgment Day for fashion? I wanted to walk away. Really, I did. But something about him, about how still he was, how ancient, pinned me to the floor. Why are you here? I asked. Really? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, not threateningly, just enough to lower his voice and say, You're human, you're soft, you get attached. And yet, he broke around you. That makes you dangerous. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back up the stairs, his footsteps making no sound at all. I stood there for a full minute, clutching a bag of trash and questioning every life choice I'd ever made. Back inside, Rosa had emerged just far enough to glare at the ceiling again. Her tail flicked sharply, agitated. Yeah, I murmured. I don't like him either, but that was a lie. I didn't like him, but I was very, very curious. And I already knew curiosity was my worst habit. That, and Caleb. The coffee shop on the corner was one of those warm little miracles that smelled like caramel, cinnamon, and student loan debt. All the tables were mismatched. The window seat had a cushion that tried to swallow your spine. The chalkboard menu offered poetic lies like happiness in a cup and caffeine, not therapy. It was also the only place near my apartment that didn't play acoustic Taylor Swift on repeat. So naturally, I was here at 7:42 a.m., nursing my dignity and a half-full sketchbook. "You look like someone who's either in love or contemplating arson," said Jonas, the barista/therapist in a shirt that read "Espresso yourself before you wreck yourself." I gave him a thumbs up. Little column A, little column B. Jonas had that kind of face you trusted too quickly, sleepy eyes, a crooked smile, and the ability to remember everyone's order without ever writing it down. But there was something behind the laid-back charm. Something watchful. The kind of stillness you only noticed if you stopped being distracted by the tattoos, jokes, and cinnamon swirls. On the back of his hand, just above the thumb joint, was a small circular symbol. I had no idea what it meant, but it always felt like it was looking back. I took a sip of my coffee and tried to focus on my sketchbook, just lines, shapes, muscle memory. Anything but. The door chimed. I didn't even have to look. The air changed. Like someone had turned the room down a few degrees. Or maybe I was imagining it. Again. "Black," came the voice. Smooth, deep, and sharp as a knife freshly honed. Hotter than hell, stronger than most of its inhabitants. Jonas didn't flinch. "Sure. Coming right up, sir." I peeked over the rim of my cup and saw him. Varin. Of course. He was wearing the same black coat. No umbrella, even though it had started to drizzle outside. His hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends. He looked like a noir villain who'd walked straight out of a thunderstorm and into the wrong century. I tried to stay still and invisible. But fate, much like my ex, is a petty little thing. He turned, saw me, and walked over. Because of course he did. "Do you haunt all local coffee shops?" I asked. "Or just the ones I go to?" "I was here before you," he said, sliding into the seat across from me uninvited. "You're haunting me." I narrowed my eyes. "If I'm a ghost, then you're definitely what people see right before sleep paralysis kicks in." He ignored that. Of course he did. Instead he scanned my sketchbook, where I had half finished drawing a cat wearing sunglasses and drinking boba. My defense mechanism. "You teach children?" "I teach people. Of all ages. Drawing is for everyone," I said. "Even emotionally constipated shadows like yourself." Jonas appeared with Varin's coffee and set it down like he was defusing a bomb. "Let me know if you need anything else," he said with that usual lazy grin. But his eyes flicked to me. A quick flash of warning. I filed that away for later. Varin picked up his cup, inhaled the scent, and then finally said, "Humans are strange. Yeah, we cry at sunsets, remember?" He took a sip. "I meant more broadly. You create attachments where you shouldn't. You grieve things that were never yours. You love things that kill you. You say that like you're not part of the problem." He tilted his head. "I never claimed innocence." Silence stretched between us like tight wire. Then he added, almost casually, "You didn't cry when he left, did you?" "Why?" I asked. "Would that have made me more respectable in your ancient demon dad eyes?" "I'm not ancient. You said Caleb was in his 20s. You're either ancient or a time traveler. Pick one." He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back, coffee in hand, and said, "People are fascinating, especially the ones who don't know when to leave." My eyes narrowed. "Are you talking about me? Am I wrong?" I shrugged. "Depends. Are you still here because of Caleb, or because you like the smell of burnt paint and desperation?" His smile was so faint, I almost missed it. "And what do you think?" he asked. I said, "You don't know yet. And that terrifies you." For a second, something flickered in his expression. Then Jonas called from the counter, "Hey Picasso, your 10 o'clock canceled. Want more caffeine, or are you just emotionally running on fumes today?" I stood up. Both, obviously. Varin didn't move. I paused, glanced at him. I'm sure I'll see you again. After all, people like me don't know when to leave. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back. Not judging, just watching. The scratching started again around 2:14 a.m. I checked the clock because I'd been awake, again, and staring at the cracked ceiling like it might eventually offer me answers, or at least leak motivation. Rosa was already on edge, ears pinned flat, tail twitching like a metronome set to murder. She sat perched on the kitchen counter, staring at the spot where the ceiling met the wall, growling softly. "Don't you dare climb the cabinets again," I warned, half-hearted and sleep-slurred. She hissed, and then ran, to hide behind the sink like the shadows had teeth. I sat up straighter, heart ticking faster than I liked. There it was, that noise, not footsteps, not quite. It sounded like something dragging, claws over wood. Deliberate, like whatever was up there wanted to be heard. But only by me. Then came the voice, not in English, not in any language I recognized. It rose and fell in melodic cadence, almost singing, but deeper, like rocks grinding together, like thunder trying to whisper. I swallowed. It was beautiful, and terrifying. I tried to distract myself by making tea I didn't want and opening my sketchbook. The lines came jittery tonight. A half-formed figure in shadow, a pair of wings that didn't look angelic. I scratched them out, but the shape kept coming back. I shut the book and stared at my mug. "Okay," I muttered to no one. "This is fine. Normal post-breakup stuff. Hallucinate your hot demon neighbor. Sketch his hypothetical wings. Everyone does that." Rosa sneezed from behind the sink, as if offended by my rationalizing. The next morning, I walked to the coffee shop looking like I'd lost a fight with insomnia, and maybe also a small raccoon. Jonas raised an eyebrow as I walked in, then handed me my usual without comment. "I'm going to start a loyalty card for people who look like they're being haunted," he said after a beat. "I'm not being haunted," I said automatically. "You say that like it's convincing." I leaned on the counter. "My cat is acting like there's a demon in the ceiling. I keep hearing weird sounds from upstairs, and I swear my neighbor is either a vampire, a warlock, or just extremely committed to mysterious drama." Jonas's face didn't change, but he reached beneath the counter and handed me a cinnamon muffin. "On the house," he said. "Oh no," I said, eyeing it. "Is this like an offering? Are you trying to appease me before I become possessed?" He grinned. "Maybe I just like feeding anxious artists. But mostly, he said, dropping his voice to a mock whisper, some entities do like older buildings. Lots of emotional residue. Broken pipes, cracks in the foundation. Makes them feel at home." I stared. He stared back. Smile friendly. Eyes sharp. I cleared my throat. "So you've read too much Lovecraft. Cool. Cool. He shrugged. "Just saying. You ever wonder why that guy upstairs never blinks?" "You've noticed too?" "Oh yeah. That man makes a double espresso look emotionally stable." Back at home, I stood under the ceiling and tried to will it to not make noise. Rosa circled my legs once, then climbed into my lap as I sat on the couch. Her body trembled slightly. She never trembled. Something brushed above my head. A thud. Then stillness. I held my breath, and for a second, I swore I heard my name. Soft. Drawn out. Like breath across ice. Miles. I jerked upright, but there was nothing. No more sound. Just the refrigerator humming like it knew something I didn't. Rosa didn't react this time. She was purring now, as if whatever had been there wasn't threatening anymore, or was watching. I should have felt afraid, but instead, I felt seen, and I wasn't sure which was worse. The classroom smelled like dry paper, charcoal dust, and that faint hint of turpentine that clung to every art program no matter how much ventilation you had. The afternoon light filtered through tall windows, pooling in uneven gold puddles across the scratched-up linoleum floor. It was the kind of silence I loved most, alive, textured. The sound of pencils scratching, the hush of students concentrating, the occasional sigh of someone erasing half an hour's work. Everyone else was working on still life studies. I wasn't. I was sketching something else. Something I wasn't thinking about. It just came. First, the shadows. Long, elegant lines forming around something tall. Then the posture, rigid but weighted like stone. Then the mouth, stern, unsmiling. Eyes that never blinked, that watched everything and gave nothing. Before I even registered what I'd done, I was staring down at a drawing of him. Varin. Or something close to him. It wasn't realistic, more of a suggestion, a shape formed in fog. His coat blended into wings that weren't quite wings. His face was sharper than in real life, but no less intense. And his eyes, they weren't human. They weren't cruel either. They were aware. I blinked, suddenly breathless. Why did I draw him like that? Not like the stranger who hated my slippers. Not like the shadow I heard in the ceiling. But like a man who was holding back fire just to keep sitting still. And worse, like someone who was lonely in the silence. I shook my head and flipped the page shut. The class ended. Students shuffled out, laughing, groaning about assignments, already texting as they left. I stayed behind to clean brushes and reorganize supply bins. My brain still buzzed from the drawing. So I didn't hear the footsteps until they were very close. I turned, and there he was. Varin. In my classroom. He was standing by the back door, coat undone, dark shirt rolled at the sleeves like he just stepped out of a war, or a board meeting. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd walked through wind and didn't bother smoothing it down. He didn't speak, just looked at me. Then down at the table. At the sketchbook I'd forgotten to put away. Shit. I reached for it too late. He stepped forward and laid one hand gently on the page, holding it open. His gaze traced every line. Slowly. Deliberately. Then he said, so quietly I almost missed it. You see me as something I never was. My throat closed. I wasn't. It just came out. He didn't look up. Most people, when they imagine me, draw teeth, horns, fire. You drew silence. And shape. I swallowed. Is that bad? No, he said. Then, finally meeting my eyes. It's unsettling. We stood there in the golden light, neither moving. The room, once warm, felt almost sacred, like we'd stepped into a space between thoughts. I didn't mean to spy on your soul, I joked, voice breaking a little. That wasn't on the syllabus. You didn't, he said. You listened. He sat down, not across from me, beside me. The scrape of the metal chair on the floor made Rose's absence feel suddenly sharp, like I needed her now to say what I couldn't. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes still on the drawing. I used to think, he said, that being unknown was power, that to hide everything meant keeping control. And now I sit in coffee shops where baristas wear jokes on their chests and watch someone sketch a stranger into something sacred. A small laugh escaped me. So, coffee shops ruined your whole mystique? Not the coffee, he murmured. He was too close. I felt the heat of him, barely. But it pulsed like static across my skin. Do you miss him? I asked before I could stop myself. Your son? The silence was heavy. Then, yes, but not in the way he wants. He looked at me. Really looked. No, it wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And I understood, because I'd once loved Caleb for who I thought he could be, not for who he was. You don't seem surprised I drew you like this, I said, voice low. I'm not. Because it's true? Because you saw it. He stood, slow and smooth. I'm not what you think I am, Miles, he said. I rose too. I don't think you know what I think. His smile, barely there, creased one corner of his mouth. Then we're even. And then he left. No flourish, no sound, just absence. But it lingered, like the scent of charcoal. Or something warmer. The courtyard behind the apartment complex was quiet at dusk. The old bricks held the day's heat, and the ivy climbing the fence swayed gently in the breeze. Somewhere, someone grilled something that smelled aggressively meaty. Rosa sat curled at my feet, chewing on a leaf like it had personally insulted her. I was leaning against the metal railing near the stairwell, sketchpad in one hand, coffee in the other, not drawing, just scribbling lines, letting the pen wander. I've been told I'm hard to capture. I didn't look up. Varin, if you keep sneaking up on me, I'm going to start charging you emotional rent. He stepped into view. No coat this time. Just a simple dark shirt, sleeves pushed to the elbows. He looked less carved from stone today, less distant, almost human? I'm not sneaking, he said. You're simply easy to find, flattering. Rosa flicked her tail without looking up. He leaned on the railing beside me, hands loose at his sides. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "You drew me, and you didn't set it on fire." Progress. He exhaled through his nose. Something that might have been a laugh in a different lifetime. I looked up at him. "Why are you still here?" A beat. "Then because you are." I blinked. That was unexpected, and unfair, and deeply, deeply confusing. And then the door opened behind us, and Hell walked in wearing designer jeans. Caleb always had perfect timing, the kind that ruined things. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, tan, and dressed like he didn't try, though every thread was curated. Hair tousled, collar just slightly askew in that my chaos is sexy kind of way. His smile hit me like sandpaper. "Miles," he said, drawing out the syllables like a slow drag of a match. I stiffened. Varin didn't move. "Wow," Caleb said, looking between us. "This is cozy." "Not really," I muttered. He stepped closer, thumbs hooked in his pockets. "Dad, you never mentioned you and Miles were on speaking terms. Let alone standing around looking broody in a courtyard terms." Varin's eyes narrowed just slightly. "You never asked," he said. Caleb laughed. It was light and brittle. "Right. Because we're such a talkative family. You're the one who stopped speaking." I stopped shouting into silence. Caleb snapped. "There's a difference," Rosa hissed, low and precise. Caleb ignored her. His gaze snapped back to me. "So, what's the play here, Miles? You working through some unresolved daddy issues?" "That's rich coming from you," I said, suddenly cold. "Considering your idea of emotional connection was treating me like a mirror you refused to clean." "Ouch," he said. But there was no humor in it. Varin stepped forward, only slightly, but enough to shift the air. "That's enough." Caleb turned to him, jaw tight. "Now you care? Now you talk? You've ignored me for years, and you break your vow of radio silence. For him?" "I didn't ignore you," Varin said, voice calm like a tide rising. "You stopped listening. You stopped hearing anything that didn't sound like praise. You're lecturing me on ego?" Caleb snapped. "That's rich. You disappeared when she died. You abandoned us." "I left," Varin said, "because I knew what I would become if I stayed." There it was, a silence sharp enough to bleed. I took a step back. This wasn't my argument. This wasn't my war. But then Caleb looked at me again, really looked, and his voice dropped. "You like this, don't you?" I flinched. "You like being chosen over me." "No," I said. "I like being seen." He didn't respond, didn't blink, just turned around and walked out the gate like the ground offended him. The air settled in the quiet he left behind. Varin stared after him, unmoving. I swallowed hard. "I should go," I said, barely above a whisper. Varin turned toward me. "You didn't have to stay." "Yeah," I said. "But I did. And then I left. Not because I was scared, but because I finally understood that some ghosts aren't haunting you, they're just not ready to be forgotten." I woke up to Rosa hissing, not annoyed hissing, terrified. She stood rigid on the windowsill, back arched, fur spiked like static, her eyes locked on the front door. Then I heard it. A creak. Not from upstairs this time, but inside my apartment. I sat up slowly, heart already racing. My fingers reached for my phone, but it was across the room, abandoned on my desk next to a half-finished drawing of someone I didn't want to think about right now. Another sound. Something sharp dragged across the floor, slow and deliberate, like nails on concrete. "Hello?" I called, instantly regretting it. The room grew colder. Not just AC chilly, but grave deep cold. The kind that lived in places sunlight couldn't reach. Then came the voice. Not Varin's. Not human. "You smell like him," it whispered from the dark. "You've touched him. Been marked." I stood, backing toward the kitchen, grabbing the first thing I could find, a metal spatula. "Brilliant, Miles. Maybe it'll grill his soul." From the shadows near the coat rack, something shifted. Two gleaming red eyes blinked open. A form unraveled. Tall, angular, wrong. Its skin rippled like smoke, and its limbs bent wrong. Too many joints, too many shadows clinging to places light should have reached. I didn't scream, but I wanted to. The thing took a step forward, and the walls themselves groaned. "You're just a vessel," it said. "A weakness." I raised the spatula. "Back off." I burned toast without trying. Imagine what I could do on purpose. The creature tilted its head and smiled. It lunged. And then, everything ignited. The front door exploded inward in a flash of heat and shadow, and the thing was torn from midair. A wall of fire slammed into the center of the room, curving around me like a protective dome. And in the middle of that blaze stood him. Varin, not in his human disguise, not hiding, not anymore. His coat was gone. His skin shimmered like molten obsidian, carved with symbols that pulsed like embers under skin. Wings unfurled behind him, vast, dark, flickering at the edges like smoke catching fire. His eyes blazed gold, and his hands ended in curved claws that dripped with heat. He looked like the end of the world, and he was glorious. The creature hissed, backing into the wall, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You have no claim here," Varin growled, voice layered, low and thunderous, like 100 voices speaking in unison. "This one reeks of you," the creature spat. "You've grown sentimental." "Leave," Varin said, "before I forget mercy." The thing screamed, high and thin and hateful, and vanished in a coil of smoke. The fire dropped instantly. Silence crashed in. Ash floated through the air like snow. And then Varin turned to me. His eyes dimmed. His wings faded. The claws remained a moment longer, then retracted, replaced by human hands. He stepped forward slowly, chest rising and falling with effort. "I'm sorry," he said. "You weren't supposed to see me like that." I was still pressed against the counter, spatula in hand, heart thudding like a drum solo gone wrong. But I wasn't scared. Not of him. "You saved me," I whispered. He shook his head once. "I endangered you. They can sense me through you now." "You mean because you're interested?" His jaw clenched. "Because I'm connected." I took a breath. Then I stepped closer. Close enough to see the sweat beating at his temples. The faint glow still humming under his skin. The fear, real, raw, in his eyes. And I reached out. My hand brushed his cheek. Warm. Too warm. Like sunlight through glass. "You're wrong," I said softly. "About one thing." He looked at me. I smiled. "I'm glad I saw you like that." He stared at me, expression unreadable. Then his hand came up, slowly, cautiously, and cupped the side of my face. His thumb brushed just under my eye. A gesture so gentle, it nearly undid me. "You're strange," he murmured. "I get that a lot." A pause. Then, "and brave." That one I didn't get much. But I held his gaze and didn't flinch. Because I wasn't brave. I was just seen, maybe for the first time. The flames were gone. The shadows had retreated. Rosa, ever the survivor, had crawled back out, and now rubbed against Varin's leg like he was the safe one. Maybe he was. Maybe, just maybe, so was I. The roof of our building wasn't glamorous. The chairs were old, the railing was rusted, and someone had tried to grow herbs in cracked ceramic pots but gave up halfway through summer. Still, it had a view. The kind of endless sprawl that made the city feel both infinite and heartbreakingly small. I brought 2 candles and a blanket. Not romantic. Just warmer than fluorescent lighting and safer than silence. Varin stood near the edge, his coat brushing the breeze, hands in his pockets like he wasn't sure what to do with them. The candlelight danced along his jaw, casting his features in gold and shadow. He looked both ancient and brand new. I used to come up here after fights, I said. Or when Caleb would disappear for days and I'd pretend it didn't bother me. You shouldn't have had to pretend, he said quietly. I gave a dry laugh. You'd be amazed how good I got at it. He didn't answer right away. Then he turned to face me. She used to sit on rooftops too. It took me a second. Caleb's mother? Varin nodded once. Her name was Alira. She was soft, but strong. She saw through me. Even when I didn't want to be seen, I didn't breathe. I never meant to love her, he went on. Demons don't form attachments easily. But she broke every rule I thought I understood. And Caleb? He was born of that defiance, that love. Varin's voice caught. But when she died, I wasn't something a child should be near. I was rage, and grief, and fire barely contained. So I left. The wind tugged at the blanket around my shoulders, like it wanted to carry those words away. He grew up without me, Varin said. And I stayed away to protect what was left of her in him. I swallowed. But you still watched. I did. And now? He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't look guarded. There's a point where watching becomes cowardice, he said. And then you showed up. That pulled me up short. Me. You were too loud, too honest. You laughed at things he didn't. You cried over things I couldn't understand. You challenged both of us without realizing it. My throat tightened. So I was a problem. He stepped closer, candlelight catching in his eyes like small golden storms. No. You were a reason. I blinked. A reason for what? To stay. Silence. Real silence. Not awkward. Not dramatic. Just full. He stood so close now I could feel the warmth coming off him. Not fire, not heat from rage or magic. But something gentler. Like when the sun hits your neck after a cold wind. I asked, voice small. You stayed because of me? Yes. Not hesitation. Not apology. Just yes. Something inside me cracked open. Slowly. Carefully. I thought you hated me, I whispered. I thought I did too, he admitted. Because you made it harder to stay away. I looked up at him, the city behind us pulsing like a heartbeat. And now? I don't want to stay away. He reached out, tentative, like he still didn't trust himself, and brushed a candle-warmed thumb along my cheekbone. You make me remember the parts of myself I buried, and I don't know yet if that's mercy or punishment. I laughed, wet and soft. Maybe it's just being human. I'm not human, Miles. I leaned into his touch anyway. Doesn't mean you can't feel like one sometimes. We stood like that for a long moment, 2 broken shapes held together by candlelight, and something unspoken. Then I asked, what would Alira think of me? Varin's hand didn't move. She would have liked you, he said. And Caleb? He still could, he said quietly. If he stops needing to be the only story in the room. That hit harder than I expected. But this, Varin added, looking down at me, isn't about him anymore. No, I agreed, chest tight. It's not. And just like that, I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. The knock wasn't loud. It was angry. 3 sharp raps, followed by silence that rang with intent. Rosa leapt off the windowsill and bolted under the couch. I already knew who it was. Still, I opened the door. Caleb. Of course. He looked like a storm bottled in skin. Hair disheveled, eyes too bright, chest rising like he'd run here instead of driven. His button-up was half undone, as if he hadn't decided whether to look composed or desperate. Miles, he said, voice too smooth. Like he was trying to sound calm and forgot how to do it. What do you want? I asked, not moving from the doorway. He pushed past me anyway. Classic Caleb. Same cologne. Same chaotic energy wrapped in designer confidence. He paced once, then turned. I made a mistake, he said. We both did. I crossed my arms. Go on. I let things fall apart, he said. But they don't have to stay that way. I've been thinking. We could start over. I blinked. Start over? You always said I was emotionally distant, right? I can fix that. I want to fix that. Why now? He faltered just for a second. You and him, he said. It's not real. You know it's not. That's not your decision. He stepped closer. He's my father. And I was your partner, I said. You don't get to claim either of us. You don't understand him, he snapped. He's not like you think. Maybe not, I said quietly. But I understand you. And that's why this won't work. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, pacing again. I'm offering you everything you used to beg me for. No, I said. You're offering it now that someone else gave it to me first. His mouth tightened. I'm serious, Miles. You said you wanted a future. I'm giving you one. No, I said again. Calm. Certain. You're offering a do-over. A fantasy. But I don't want the version of you that shows up only when you feel replaced. That stung. I saw it land behind his eyes. He took another step toward me. You're throwing this away for a demon. I'm choosing someone who didn't wait until I walked away to see me. His voice dropped, bitter. You really think he loves you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Caleb shook his head. You always were good at making yourself the victim. That one hurt more than it should have. But I swallowed it. You always knew how to make things hurt, I said softly. But he's the first one who made it stop hurting. The silence that followed wasn't triumphant. It was tired. It was final. Caleb looked around like he was seeing the apartment for the first time. The sketches, the candle, the faint warmth in the room that didn't belong to him. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. I hope he breaks your heart, he said. I hope he doesn't, I replied. But if he does, at least I'll know it was real. He left. The door shut, and the past went with it. If it hurt, I didn't feel it. I felt light, not happy, not yet, but free, and that was better. The stairwell was quiet in that late-night way, where every creak of a floorboard echoed like a threat. The air was thick with humidity and something else. Tension. Rosa had been pacing the apartment, tail puffed like a bottle brush. Something had her spooked, and lately, that usually meant him. But this time, it wasn't Varin. I stepped into the stairwell because I felt it, wrong, like the walls were holding their breath. And there, standing at the landing between floors, was Jonas. Still in his barista t-shirt, still smiling, but his eyes were wrong, too still, too focused. And Varin was standing opposite him, motionless, tense. Between them, etched into the concrete floor, was something glowing. A mark. No, a trap. Circular, humming with low heat and ancient sigils. I didn't need to ask what it was. I could feel it. Varin was caught. I didn't want it to come to this, Jonas said, voice soft. But you're slipping. Getting sloppy. Varin didn't answer. Demons don't fall in love, Jonas went on. When they do, people get burned, or worse. I took a step down. What are you doing? Jonas didn't look at me. Finishing something that should have been done decades ago. No, I said. You're about to start something. Something worse. He's not what you think, Miles. I know what he is, I said. He's a demon. I get it. You want a medal for spotting horns? Jonas turned to me finally. His face was calm. Deadly. He saved you once. Good for him. But eventually things like him stop choosing kindness. They start remembering what they really are. And humans don't? I shot back. You're the one who's standing in the dark with a glowing murder circle. Jonas's fingers flexed. Step aside. No. Don't be stupid. I moved between them. Just one step. But it echoed like thunder. He is a demon, I said. But he's the one who pulled me out of fire. Who stood beside me when your kind watched? Jonas's jaw clenched. If you kill him, I said, voice steady, who's going to protect me from you? That landed hard. The silence cracked, loud and real. Behind me, I heard Varin's breath hitch. Just slightly. Jonas looked past me. Through me. For a second, I saw doubt. Then exhaustion. Then retreat. The glow dimmed. The mark broke, and Jonas turned away. This isn't over, he muttered. No, I said. It never is. That's why you have to choose when it ends. He left. Just like that. Gone. The air eased, like an exhale. The sigils burned out. And I turned. Varin stood where he had, shoulders tense, face unreadable. But his eyes weren't glowing. They were just his, dark, deep, and full of something I hadn't seen before. Grief. Maybe for what almost happened. Or maybe for me. You didn't have to do that, he said, voice low. I know, I said. But I did. We looked at each other in the half-dark stairwell, surrounded by fading symbols, and the scent of something almost like ash. And neither of us moved. But we didn't need to, because the choice had already been made. The sky was starting to shift when I stepped onto the balcony. Not quite sunrise. Not quite night. That fragile, in-between hush where the world doesn't breathe yet. The city below still slept, streetlights flickering like they weren't sure whether to give up or keep glowing. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and leaned on the railing. Rosa followed, hopping into the chair beside me with the entitlement only cats and ex-boyfriends possess. She curled into a cinnamon-colored coil, flicked her tail once, and stared toward the east like she expected something. So did I. But not what I got. Footsteps behind me. Quiet. Measured. I didn't turn. Not yet. He came anyway. Of course he did. Varin stood just to my left, far enough not to touch, close enough to feel. I didn't say anything. He didn't either. We just stood. Until he spoke, voice low. I left last night. I noticed. I wasn't going to come back. I nodded slowly. Also noticed. Silence again. And then, but I did. I finally turned to face him. His eyes looked softer in this light. Less gold, more smoke. Still ancient. Still impossible. But human somehow. Around the edges. I told myself it would be easier, he said, gaze on the skyline. To walk away before I made another mistake. Before I broke something I wasn't meant to touch. You're not a curse, Varin, I said. You're not broken. I'm not whole either. No one is. He glanced at me. I'm not human, Miles. I won't age with you. I won't change. My worst day will always be buried under fire and teeth. I don't know how to build something. You built walls just fine, I said. You can start there. He huffed. Half sigh, half laugh. You think this is funny? I think I'm tired of pretending I want safe and normal, when what I actually want is you. That got his attention. You don't want normal? He asked, cautious. I stepped closer. I want you. Sleep-deprived, broody, judgy, with eyebrows that can burn holes in furniture. And yes, with coffee at 6 in the morning. He stared. I kept going. I want the you who saved me. The you who watched the world but never stepped in. Until I became the one thing you couldn't look away from. I want the version of you that tries to act like he doesn't care, but still stares at my sketchbook for 10 minutes like it holds answers. He blinked. I added quietly, I want the one who came back. He looked like he was going to argue, or run, or vanish into mist and regret. But instead, he reached out. Slow, gentle. He touched my cheek, the same way he had in Firelight. But now, it was with nothing supernatural behind it. No blaze. No wings. Just skin. Warm. Steady. I can't be normal, he said again. I don't want normal. He stepped forward. And we rested our foreheads together. Quiet. Breath synced. Time slowed. I still don't understand why the sunrise matters to you, he murmured. Because it's a promise, I said. Of something new. of warmth coming back. He pulled back just enough to look at the horizon. The sun crested. He winced slightly, like the light still stung, but not as much as before. Not with me there. And then he whispered, "You know, it doesn't hurt as much when you're here." We stayed like that as the sky turned gold and the day began. He didn't leave, and I didn't need him to change. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't loving a demon. It's realizing he loves you back. And he does. In his own way. In his own fire. And that's enough.